Now joined by the Social Development Minister, Lindiwe Zulu, Gerald Bourke from the World Food Programme, Vishwas Satgar, the chairperson of the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign, and associate researcher and author from Wits, that's Tracey Ledger. Minister, good morning. May I start off with you? Do you know, does the government know how many South Africans are actually hungry right now on a daily basis? We are hearing reports that hunger has worsened during COVID-19. Minister, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but the sound is not so very good. You keep disappearing for some reason.
I'll repeat my question. Welcome and thank you very much for your time. With COVID-19 having worsened hunger, that's the reports we are getting. Do you as a government know how many South Africans are hungry on a daily basis right now?
Yes, absolutely. Remember that the issue of food and accessibility of food and hunger is not something that the department or the government of President Cyril Ramaphosa only started knowing about. In fact, what we did with the challenges of COVID-19 through the net joints, we had to look at the areas in particular that are mainly affected by hunger. But I don't want to say that the issue of hunger is a challenge because of COVID-19. COVID-19 simply exacerbated the situation, because even those people who were able to fend for themselves, even the ones who are being supported by government, in this case through the Department of Social Development and the National Development Agency, were not able to do the things that they normally do, or the cooperatives that normally do what they have to do with their food gardens and all that. So the whole issue of food security was just made worse by the different levels which were declared, and rightfully so. So people were not able to move as they usually move. So we are aware of the provinces in particularly that are hard hit, that had that issue of poverty even before: your Eastern Cape, your KZN, your Northern Cape, even in Gauteng, I may say, because sometimes people take it that if Gauteng doesn't have a lot of rural areas, it doesn't suffer the same problem. It does, because many of the people who move from other provinces coming into Johannesburg, hoping that they are going to be able to get jobs and take care of themselves, they come here and find that there's joblessness and jobs are hard to come by.
Minister, you mentioned a number of factors. My question is, how many South Africans go to bed hungry every day? Do you know?
Well, we've got about 11 million South Africans go to bed hungry, and that's quite a big number.
It's a really big number, and currently it doesn't look like it's going to improve anytime soon. We will try to get an ideas from you and the rest of the guests who are joining us for this today's special discussion as we are marking World Food Day, trying to understand how deep is the hunger crisis. Tracey Ledger, good morning, welcome. You're an author, you're a researcher. You wrote a book recently, An Empty Plate. Those three words just captured my attention. You argue that the food system is wrong.
Yes. I think that to echo what the Minister said, what we actually have in South Africa is there are actually more hungry people in urban areas than in rural areas. And the reason for that is because the reason why people are hungry is because they cannot afford to buy food. 99% of all the food that South Africans consume is purchased. And there's a huge gap between the amount of food that households have available to buy food and the cost of that food. So what we have is a situation where, first of all, just more than 1 in 4 South African children under the age of 5 is so malnourished that they are stunted. That means that they are more predisposed to lifestyle diseases like diabetes, hypertension. It's difficult for them to learn in school. There's a strong set of data that suggests that children that are chronically malnourished, which is 25% of all South African children, have an increased propensity for violence in adulthood. So childhood malnutrition is probably the single biggest factor behind our high levels of domestic violence. But the data also shows that only 20% of South African households can afford to buy a nutritionally balanced basket of food. So we've got people who are not hungry, but they're malnourished.
And urban areas seem to suffer more, and our children are bearing the brunt of that. Now, Vishwas Satgar, you chair the South African Food Sovereignty campaign. We know that the right to food is enshrined in our Constitution. It's contained in Section 27, but it just seems like it's on paper.
Agreed. And I think that this has been a big issue for us, to bring to the fore the deeper systemic problems with our food system. One official statistic that government has used before COVID-19 is that 14 million people went to bed hungry. And this has got to do with the commodification of food, a food system, a corporate-controlled food system that really cannot feed a big segment of our population. At the same time, and I agree with the minister, COVID-19 has also fed into this crisis, and we need to unpack this issue. School feeding schemes immediately impacted 10 million children, suspending those. The fallout in terms of employment, 4 million people in our informal economy suddenly did not have the basis to earn an income. And so the crisis just mushroomed. It's been a moving target. But the third important factor here has been the drought. South Africa has experienced the worst drought in its history. It is in its 6th year right now. And in our view, the government has not learned lessons. In the context of this drought, in 2018, we took a Food Sovereignty Act to Parliament, developed by civil society, thinking deeply about the challenges we are facing. Our food system collapsed during the drought. Our livestock production collapsed, our maize production collapsed, etc. But the government has not listened to us. And as a result, we are facing this multifaceted systemic crisis. So the right to food can only be affirmed with a systemic approach. And this is why we are arguing that in this context, right now, we need to be grappling with the challenge of the next food system. And we are calling it a food sovereignty system.
We're going to unpack that later on as we continue to find out what we should be doing next. Minister, just want to give you a quick response. Vishwas says your government is not listening to the activists when they are talking about how to resolve this situation. A quick response from you?
Well, let me just say that this government is one government that does the best to listen to people. This government goes out into consultations with people, and this government does not choose who it listens to and who it does not listen to. So my approach at all times is to say, as South Africans, when we have a challenge, the best thing for us to do at all times, and as it has been expressed at all times, is for us to talk to each other. Even as I am occupying this platform at this moment, I do want to say the issue of hunger and food security in South Africa is not a one department problem. It is a governmental challenge, both at national, provincial, and local. It is also a challenge for all of us as society to try and look for the solutions. I agree with the fact that the food is enshrined in the Constitution. I agree with him, for instance, when he says that drought is one of the biggest challenges that we have in South Africa. But let me also say, from a Department of Small Business Social Development, we are dependent also on other departments also coordinating with us. The Department of Agriculture, the Department of Small Business Development, the Department of Health, and the Department of Education, because when we talk about the children who were unable to go to school because of the different levels which were not enabling them to go to school, so the schools were affected. My approach to this is, I am here because we have to engage with each other, we have to find solutions with each other. If he feels that government has not been listening, I'm here to say, let's talk to each other. Which of the department has not been listening? Why have they not been listening? But what needs to be done in the future to make sure that people like the two panelists that we have here, these are people who do research. These are people who take their time to take the data and break it down. And therefore, as government and ourselves as the Department of Social Development, we really rely a lot on partnering with people and working with others.
I think, Minister,
so
there is...
because we do want to...
Minister, I think there is a deep appreciation that this is a multi-sectoral approach. Nobody's apportioning blame just to your department, and you're making a valid point. All of us have to be working together to sort it out. But just to get an understanding that there is a need to be talking to each other, I think you need to take that to heart and engage with the various areas offline. Now, it's good to know that...
That's what I'm agreeing to do.
Yes, and I think that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But as usual, we try and learn from others to see what others are doing. South Africa is the so-called superpower of Southern Africa, biggest economy in the region. We've got as well with us Gerald Bourke from the World Food Programme. Now, the World Food Programme, under the United Nations umbrella, operates in this region. Its offices are in our country. Gerald, when you listen to these comments and when you look at South Africa's situation, the region as well must have been exposed to drought over the years. I remember working and living in Mozambique in the 80s, where the worst drought in Southern Africa, even Zimbabwe, at the time in the 80s, that was regarded as a food basket for the region, suffered in that drought. Currently, when you look at South Africa, what can we learn from the rest of the region? Are they also suffering from food insecurity?
Well, so many problems identified by our other guests that are afflicting South Africa, they have parallels elsewhere in the region. The World Food Programme operates in 12 countries in this region, and drought is a recurring problem. Climate change, we had the cyclones that hit Mozambique and elsewhere last year. You have the sort of economic disarray in Zimbabwe, for example, and in other countries. And you have conflict, Eastern DRC, Northern Mozambique. So there are a multitude of contributing factors to what is a growing hunger crisis. The World Food Programme's forecasting modelling indicates that in the 12 countries where we work in this region, over the coming months, as many as 52 million people will need food assistance. That has been largely compounded by COVID, and it's almost double our pre-COVID projection of 27 million people in those 12 countries in need of food assistance.
Now, regionally, we are in trouble. The minister said 11 million South Africans go to bed hungry every day. Vishwas mentioned a number of 14 million. The numbers are staggering. The reality, we do have a humanitarian crisis. But interestingly, South Africa produces a lot of food. Food should be available. What is wrong with the system? What needs to change? We'll try and address that when we continue our discussion shortly with the Social Development Minister, Lindiwe Zulu, Gerald Bourke from the World Food Programme, Vishwas Satgar, the chairperson of the Southern African Food Sovereignty Campaign, and associate researcher and author from Wits Tracey Ledger. Stay with us.